football, cricket, rugby. Hello and welcome to another English podcast with Paul. I'm your host, Paul, and as always, natural native English conversation. I do have some notes because this is unscripted and unedited. So bear with me if you see me looking down, or I might grab my glasses. Right, so the title, what we're talking about here today, we're talking about sports, specifically that come from Britain. All right. Some people may argue. They may say, oh no, that's from our country, this is from that country. Feel free to comment below and give me a citation or some evidence to prove otherwise. I am open, I am listening, and your comments would be greatly welcomed and we can discuss it. So, look at these sports. Just to name a few, this is not all of them, this is just some of them. Right, so we've got football. Now, modern day football we're talking about, because there was a version back in the Middle Ages where people's heads would be chopped off and put in bags and kicked around. That doesn't really consist as football in the modern day. So it's sort of conceived, they say, in Britain, in a place called Rugby, where rugby and the football was separated. So kind of like 1863. So it was called rugby football, but it separated there in rugby in 1863. That's where they claim it was done. Again, this is not a scientific paper. I'm not an expert on sports. That's what's claimed. So yes, football is very different to the American game of soccer. Well, it's not different, it's the same, but the name is different. And many people in America and around the world know a lot of our famous football sports stars, such as David Beckham. And he's been to America and set up and helped set up camps and clubs in America as well, in the US. He's very well known. We also have a lot more famous football stars. I've been traveling before, and I've been at the top of a mountain in Germany where they have this really, really big, long cable car in the Black Forest. And I think something like Bad Nendorf. Bad Nendorf. I think that was it, or near there. And right at the top of this cable car on this mountain, I think it was like November or something, you know, like a foot of snow. And then there was a huge, great tower. Anyway, so on top of this mountain in the snow, there was a restaurant. And we didn't have a lot of money, but we went in, my wife and I, we went in and we just had a cheap hot chocolate or whatever. And the waiter was, oh, England football, oh, I love Man United and Liverpool and David Beckham. And I thought, oh my goodness, we're on top of a mountain and the waiter is speaking really good English and telling us how excited he is about football. It just goes to show how sports can bring nations and other countries together. And that's one of the positives I think that sports brings, bringing countries together. He was very excited to talk about his plans for football. All right, and another great sport that brings nations and countries together is cricket. Cricket is really a high point that lots of people enjoy talking about, participating in. You can even play it in your local field. Cricket, football. That's the beauty of some of these games. You know, they're not difficult to just play in a local field or on a patch of grass. Very easy to do. So cricket, allegedly the the southeast of England in 1909. 1909. And then I think it was transported around the world with English imperialism. So, okay, it got around, Rugby, like I said, rugby by William Webb Ellis. Okay, he was named the guy that invented rugby, and that was in 1823. So I don't know why the difference in the date between 1823 and football in 1863. I think that's when the first sort of league was developed in 1863 for football, and it probably actually separated from rugby in 1823. But that's who they name, this William Webb Ellis in the museum, in Rugby Museum. So that's the right rugby. Rugby is played again all over the world. Often it's kind of like where the British have been, I suppose, where we've colonized or sent people. But rugby is a real man's game, you know. It's not the sort of game I would fare well at, to be honest. You've got to have a real sense of go get 'em attitude and real tenacity to be able to play a game of rugby. That's for the big boys. Big boys. Okay. What else? Table tennis, ping pong, as we know it locally. Table tennis, or like lawn tennis. So tennis, I think, was derived originally from French handball, but then there's table tennis and lawn tennis. So the French handball was, sorry, the 12th to 13th century. And then more modern lawn tennis was sort of developed in Birmingham, apparently, around the late 19th century. And then I guess ping pong and table tennis come after that. So the dates all merge around a little bit. It's difficult to tell exactly what happened and where, but most modern day sports started around the 18th and 19th century. And we'll get on to why in a moment. Okay, we've also got rowing. We love rowing here in the UK. That was supposed to have started in Venice, in Italy, in 1274, for gondolas racing, and other boatmen were racing, and that was the first regatta. Okay, and then obviously we got Olympics. Now the Olympics, actually, the modern games of Olympics, 1896. And as you'd imagine, they started in Athens in Greece. Kind of not obvious, but you would expect that to be the case. Because obviously in Greece, it's famous for all the gladiators and the big colosseums, and where lots of special events happened. All right. Golf. Wow. 15th century Scotland. Now, you wouldn't think golf would be a thing to play in Scotland with the weather they generally have. But yeah, apparently that's when it was. Okay, we've also got Formula One racing. Now, that apparently was started in 1846. Marquez Antonio Bravio Sprofosa from Italy. All right, okay. 1946. And then 1950, the world's most prestigious racing competition, the Formula One. Really, really popular. Lots and lots of money involved. Sports and car enthusiasts around the world. Most prestigious. Or does that just mean the most money is spent on it? I don't know. Okay, after that we've got boxing. Right, now, originally I'd imagine it was Greece and the Olympic Games, documented in 688 BC. 688 BC, before Christ. They don't say that now, before Christ. That's kind of dissolved. That was said all the time, BC, before Christ. And now it's called before Common Era, BCE, before our local era now, before Christ. And then the other letters after dates would be AD, Anno Domini. Anno Domini. I don't know. It's confusing. Even an English person finds it confusing. BC, BCE, and Anno Domini. Okay. So, but then boxing really took off in 1861 in London. And that would have been bare knuckle boxing and fighting like that. I guess that's why people can gamble legitimately by putting two people and a referee in a ring or a square and get them to fight. So they could gamble, I guess. Right. Athletics. Again, 776 BC. Greece, again, Olympic Games. That kind of makes sense, doesn't it? The warriors and gladiators of the day when it wasn't about killing. So maybe you'd have things like javelin and other sort of gladiatorial sports. Now this one's different. Fencing, 18th century fencing, like sword fighting with those very thin swords. Italy later is in Italian, beg your pardon, Italian, but it was later improved upon by the French. So the French and Italians helped bring fencing together. Now I find that interesting. I'd like to participate and try that. All right. So the Italians and the French and Greece all really had a lot to do with European games. All right. Another one we invented, 1873 in Gloucester, England, badminton. Now, badminton is much more delicate and gentle a sport for most people, because most people can have a go. It's not about being big and strong and muscular. So badminton is a really nice sport. Okay. Now, this one you might think is very different. You may argue that this is an American sport. Now, I know they like it also in Japan. Baseball. Now, baseball was invented in 1744 in the UK. Now, this, I don't want to seem disrespectful, but we have a completely different name for it. We don't call it baseball, we call it rounders. And it's generally a field-based game that is often played by girls and women. It's rounders. You know, you have the bat, hit the ball, and then you run around the circle. I think you leave the bat there. Rounders, a girls' game, 1744. That's what it's always been perceived as in the UK. All right. Something else that's a really, really popular sport here in the UK is parkour, or free running. And I understand that's French, but that's also a very popular and very active sport. Again, both for males and females. Generally with the younger population. It's very, very physical. Okay, so why are we so first of all, what is the oldest sport? Now, the oldest sport we've got noted is polo. Polo in 600 BC, or BCE if you prefer. And that was between the Turkmens and the Persians. The oldest team game. The Turks and the Persians. And then in Britain in 1869 on Hounslow Heath. Now, why are we talking about sports? Why are we talking about the heritage of sports? Where they started, where they come from? Now, this is very interesting because a lot of sports started back in Greek and ancient times, and even 600 BCE for polo. But often sports were a pastime, a pleasure of those from aristocracy that didn't have to worry about work and finding money to support their family and feeding themselves. So sport was always just a happy hobby that people got involved with to pass the time and enjoy the weather outdoors and doing something active, more than just walking or using a bicycle in the park, in the beautiful parks. But generally, it came about, modern day sports, because of the Industrial Revolution and Britain's public schools and the British Empire. So the British schools were very much about, okay, work, work, work. And now we're going to have some really focused games for morale and team spirits and things like this. So in the public schools, you know, the schools that you pay for, they are a very big part of the curriculum, especially on the weekend. We can't be having students lazing around doing what they want and listening to music. So they keep the students very busy and active. Even to this day in posh colleges or universities like Eton College, for example, or Oxford and Cambridge. There's a lot of curricular activities, whether you're playing rugby, and then obviously a lot of rugby players wear jackets. And it's also considered a gentleman's sport. A gentleman's sport that can be rough. Interesting combination. So the public schools really helped push this because they didn't want the students sitting around and wasting time, twiddling their thumbs, and getting up to mischief, basically. They didn't want to get up to mischief. And so this was also pushed around by the British Empire. The British Empire decided that we can improve schools around the world, we can improve the English, the structure, the learning. And as much as that's very negative and arrogant, and I apologize, yes, it is arrogant that we have to force our education upon other countries. It is very arrogant. There are some benefits to it, and that's not to commend the behavior of the British Empire many years ago. But some of the learning skills that have been passed on through generations and generations of, say, engineering and mathematics and language have been very beneficial to helping the growth of many different countries. Now, I don't want to get into a debate about it now, maybe in another video, but the idea of British colonization and then countries getting their independence afterwards, many years later, after the British had sort of raped the country of the majority of their jewels and minerals and things like this, and stolen what they wanted to steal. Generally, though, it's said that after a country has been given back their sovereignty, a country can do very well. And also, whilst with the British Empire were there, the countries have done very well. Now, I had a discussion with an Indian friend of mine, and he was very mature, and we had an adult conversation. And he said that the Indian population would have done very well without the British being there, and obviously the British did a bad thing, which I agree, we did do a bad thing. It's not good invading anybody's country. It's downright disrespectful. But there we go. That was then. That's happened. That was. But I said to him, let's look at the countries that have never been invaded. Now, there's only a handful of countries that have never been invaded, and most of them are in Africa. Now, I found it very, very hard to find a country that hasn't been invaded by some European country at some time in its history that has done very well for themselves. Now, you look at Britain. Britain was invaded by the Romans, it was invaded by the Celts, it was invaded by Normandies, which is France. Well, Britain's been invaded by loads and loads and loads of different tribes and peoples over the centuries. And again, it's still not right, but generally it has some benefits of leaving behind some education, something new. I mean, take for example the Romans, the roads. Now our roads are very good because we've got a lot of understanding. The engineering of the aqueducts and the water systems, the engineering prowess and just mathematics and everything else from the Romans, and then prior to that the Greeks. It is phenomenal, the amount of evolution we garnered from that. If it wasn't for the Romans invading us, we wouldn't be nowhere near as far forward today as we are. And I guess part of that history that helps us grow and the evolution, you have to consider it as a positive thing. So, like I said, the only country I can think of that I found on the internet was 2 or 3 countries in Africa, in Central Africa, that have never been invaded. And they are still extremely poor today. They are extremely poor today. A lot of problems with government, a lot of problems with infrastructure and military and things like this, and militia. It didn't look very good. And like I said, it's very, very hard to find one country that hasn't been invaded. So yeah, sometimes there are benefits to this, and we move forward. It's yeah, we have to move forward. Right. So that was that British Empire, and the other thing that propelled Britain forward, I guess, was the Industrial Revolution. I've got another video that talks about that in a moment. But the Industrial Revolution that was brought on by inventions through engineering and mathematics and knowledge that we got through the Victorian era, that we sort of built up over the decades from many other countries and people that invaded us and things that we'd learned along the way. So, and they say the Industrial Revolution started, or the beginnings of, is to do with I think it was the materials and wool industry. This spinning jenny. This spinning jenny was a way of people that were making clothes, I assume, and cloth from wool. And this spinning jenny allowed there to be less members of staff working on making this cloth, and it automated and did the job of more than one person. So I'm assuming it did the work and was very efficient of multiple people. So they say it started with this spinning jenny in the textiles industry, and from there it went on to traction and steam engines that became and water wheels that became more powered to build bigger machines to do lots more work over a distance. And then that again went, over the whole factory. And then that spread, that engineering knowledge, that spread into farming and many other industries. So mechanization, along with steam and engine building and then diesel engines, all perpetuated to start the Industrial Revolution that they say started in England and then spilled over into Europe, into France and Germany and countries like that. So that's where they say it comes from. Again, like I said, I'm not an expert. That's just my research. So that's all the notes I have. Right. Let me know what you think. What do you think about the Industrial Revolution? What things do you think your country has learned because of being invaded by, say, the British Empire, or being invaded by the French Empire, or the Dutch? Because the Dutch and the French and the Spanish and the Portuguese were prolific. Excuse me, were prolific. Maybe because we have access to the ocean and we have history with boat building, that we are able to get out and move around and away from our own country. And then when we found other big countries and cultures that were too big to fight against, even though we fought against everybody, I think, we must have found other countries that were less able to defend themselves. And so I guess the British Empire spread that way. Like I said, much like the Dutch and the Dutch trading companies and the waterways and the trading routes, the sparked it all, the trading routes. Yeah, very interesting, very interesting. Let me know in the comments what you think. Let me know what your perspective is. What do you understand about the Dutch and the French and the Spanish and the Portuguese and all those kind of big countries and their vessels going out into the world and colonizing other countries. Very interesting. Okay, let me know in the comments what you think. And that's it for today. So as always, have fun learning. If you don't have fun learning English, then you're not going to learn. Take care and have a great day. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye for now.